As someone who exists pretty much solely within the depths of the card making universe online, as sad as that may sound, there is one product that I have seen all across my social media pages this year that I cannot seem to escape. It seems like no matter where I turn, no matter the season or time of year, I'm constantly being presented with creations made using this set of products, and that is the Waffle Flower Postage Collage collection. Now, if you don't find your identity in paper crafting, which is very fair, let me briefly explain what I'm talking about. Back at the beginning of this year, 2024, or maybe it was late last year, I'm not totally sure, Waffle Flower released a set of products called the Postage Collage set. And the original collection was made up of a die, a layered stencil set, and some stamps that basically all come together to create this postage stamp collage. So think like a collage of postage stamps like you would use in the mail. The set was immediately beloved by card makers, I think primarily because it was a really interesting design, and then it also allowed users to kind of use the products in a myriad of ways. It wasn't just a one-trick pony like so many products can be. Since the collection was so immediately popular, Waffle Flower has been expanding on it all year by adding seasonal add-ons, different sizes and styles of postage stamp dies, and even some patterned paper, so it's really easy to see why these products keep showing up on my social media. Anyway, I've been admiring these products all year long from afar, partially because I can't escape them, but I figure with the year coming to a close, it's probably about time for me to give them a try myself, so come with me. Before we dive into actually making our card today, let's go ahead and take a look at a few of the core supplies that we're going to be using. Like I said, Waffle Flower has kind of created an entire suite of products around this postage collage theme, but I'm going to be using the original Postage Collage Die, which was kind of the die that started it all. And this creates nearly an A2 size panel of different sizes and shapes of postage stamps. And I have the coordinating Postage Collage Gingerbread stencil, which is one of their holiday additions to this collection. And I don't know if you can tell, but this is a layered stencil set, and it has a bunch of gingerbread elements to it. We have a gingerbread man, a gingerbread house, some cookies. So we're going to be, of course, making a Christmas themed card today. And then I also have this complimentary stamp set, which is their Postage Collage North Pole stamp set. And these stamps are meant to mimic kind of the stamps that post offices would put on letters as they go through the mail. I forget what that process is called, except there's a little bit of a holiday twist on these. They also have a generic pack of these, which they released with the original collection earlier this year, which has more generic, less holiday specific themed stamps that you can adorn these postage collage stamped cards with. Wow, that's a mouthful. All right, now without further ado, let's go ahead and actually make this card. And if you know me, you know that I like to make my card bases first. We are using a regular A2 size card base today. So we have 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. And this is gonna be the card base for today's card that holds all of our design elements. I'm gonna go ahead and set this to the side for now. Okay, now on to the fun stuff finally. I am going to start with stenciling. You could cut out your die first if you so choose. I just prefer to stencil first. I don't know why, just a personal preference. And I am using an A2 size card panel here. So again, 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. And I am choosing to hold my card base and my stencils down with my Waffle Flower grip mat. So I have the first stencil layer down on my card panel now, and you can see that the grip mat is not only holding my cardstock in place, but it's also holding the stencil in place so I don't have to deal with any pesky tape. And one of the great things about Waffle Flower stencils in general is they actually give you some color inspiration on the stencils themselves. I'm not sure if this shows up, but it actually shows you on each layer. They kind of suggest what colors, or at least some sort of guidance on how to color them. So here we have a label for the gingerbread, and then we have the shadow layer, and then they're suggesting for layer number 4, we do red. And they also have these little etched lines around the stencil so that you can line it up with the edges of your A2 card base. Now, this first layer is for the background, and I am just gonna go with a simple blue. And for that, I'm using my Distress inks today, and I'm gonna go with Tumbled Glass. Now for today's card, I'm not actually planning to use all 6 of these stamps, but I am gonna go ahead and color all 6 of them because it's always nice to have a few extras on hand anyway. And while I'm here and have all the supplies together, why wouldn't I just go ahead and do all of them? But first, I want to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Craftsy. If you're anything like me, your social media pages are probably full of DIY and crafting inspiration, and it can be really easy to fall down the rabbit hole when you're seeing so many new crafting options at your fingertips every day. But with so many crafts to choose from, it can be really overwhelming to know where to start, but that's where Craftsy comes in. With thousands of on-demand crafting classes covering topics from painting, knitting, quilting, papercraft, even baking, Craftsy is your online resource for all things creative. Members get unlimited access to step-by-step tutorials led by experienced crafters, artists, and award-winning instructors. And Craftsy is for crafting beginners all the way up to master makers. Now, I get my fix of paper crafting already from running this channel, but I used Crafty recently to flex my creative muscles with a couple of piping classes. Fun fact about me, I love to bake, but my cake decorating could use some TLC. And I'm excited to let you know that Craftsy is offering a full year of their premium membership for only $1.49 to the first 1,000 of you who sign up using the link in my description. So go ahead, sign up, and follow those crafty ambitions. Okay, so the background layer is complete, and you can see that I just went with a simple solid blue across all of the stamped images. I have seen some folks get really fancy by doing ombre or gradient backgrounds on these, but I'm just going simple for today. And now let's go ahead and pull up layer number 1. Next, we're gonna go in with layer number 2, which is the gingerbread layer. So I'm probably just gonna do a light brown for this one. And I will say, these seem to be a little tricky to line up just because there is so much going on. So just be a little careful if you want, your images to be perfect. And for the gingerbread layer, I've decided to go with Vintage Photo, which is kind of my de facto brown, if we're being honest. All right, and alas, we have finished layer number 4, and it's time for the grand reveal. Ta-da! Isn't that pretty? And they don't quite look like stamps yet, but that's because now we gotta bring our handy dandy Postage Collage stamp die in. And you'll see that this die is very easy to line up. It lines up just perfectly with our little stenciled squares and rectangles here. And I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of tape as well. I'm using mint tape. You can use any low tack tape you like, but I just wanna make sure that I hold that die in place and it doesn't wiggle when I run it through my die cutting machine. Now you can see that I have a bunch of tiny little circles in here. I'm just gonna go ahead and poke those out with a die pick one by one. Yes, a little tedious, but also weirdly fun, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, maybe I'm a weirdo. But you can see now we have this full Postage Collage kind of background, if you will. And the beauty of this set is you can use this as pretty much the entire card, right? Like this is almost a full A2 size card, so you could kind of stop here, throw a sentiment on it, and call it a day. But what I'm actually gonna do is, here in a second, I'm gonna take some scissors and carefully cut all of these stamps apart so that I have actually 6 individual separated stamps. I'm gonna go in with a pair of scissors. You could also use a paper trimmer if you so wish, but I think since all of these stamps don't line up perfectly, I don't know, I feel it's safer to use scissors, but I'm gonna leave you to your own cutting devices. Was that a pun? I feel like that was a pun. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Is my pun game weak? Also, I think that this is probably the most fun part of the whole thing. It's also the most nerve-wracking, so maybe that's what I'm feeling, is just a bunch of adrenaline, because at any second, if you don't cut just perfectly straight, you're gonna end up with it not looking quite like a stamp. But you got this, I promise. It's really not that hard. I just like the rush. Okay, and voila, we have 6 lovely little stamps here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these off in the corner, and I don't know which ones I actually wanna use yet. I know I'm not gonna use all of them because I already kind of have the layout for my card in mind, but we're just gonna let these sit here and marinate for a second. and I'll figure out which ones I want to use here in a bit. Okay, and since I'm not using the stamp collage as the background itself, I'm actually going to be using this craft colored cardstock. This is actually a cardstock in the color Sand from Hero Arts. And I have it cut down to just an A2 size panel because I have some panels like this stored already, but I want to trim it down just a little bit because I'm also going to add a border behind it. So what I want to do is actually cut 1/8 of an inch off on all 4 sides of this panel, but instead of using a paper trimmer and trying to measure that just perfectly, I'm going to use the second largest die from my rectangle nesting dies from Hero Arts, and that is actually an A2 size rectangle minus 1/8 of an inch on all 4 sides. So this will be perfect. And voila, we have a background panel that is trimmed down to the exact size I'm looking for. And I also wanted to show y'all real quickly what I mean by the rectangle nesting dies. Most of you are probably familiar, but this is a set of what are called infinity dies by Hero Arts. So the largest rectangle is an A2 size rectangle, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And then each rectangle die, as you move inwards, is 1/8 of an inch smaller on all 4 sides than the larger rectangle die before it. And the beauty of this is all of these are proportional to an A2 size card, so it makes layering different size rectangles on your A2 card very easy. They also make this in a lot of other shapes as well, such as ovals and diamonds. I'll be sure to link this down below with all of the rest of the supplies that we're using today. Okay, now next up what I want to do is I'm actually going to add some shading to the edges of this card panel because, spoiler alert, what I want this to look like is actually a brown paper package that's going through the mail. So I'm going to kind of dirty up the sides just to not only make it look a little three-dimensional, but also just to look a little more worn and battered as if it had been through the mail. And to get that look, I am bringing back out my Vintage Photo Distress ink, and I'm just going to use a medium-sized ink brush to lightly ink up all 4 sides of this background panel. Okay, voila, we have kind of a worn package looking background now, and it'll look even more like a package, of course, once we actually start placing these stamps on here. But the first thing I'm already noticing is we've kind of created this worn package look, but these stamps look like they're in pristine condition. They're kind of stark white. So what I'm actually going to do is go in with my Distress ink again, and I'm going to use a smaller brush this time and just kind of tap down, if you will, the sides a little bit, just to kind of make these stamps look a little bit worn as well. But before I do that, I guess this is probably a good time to go ahead and pick out which stamps I actually want to use. I'm really drawn to this long, tall gingerbread house, so I definitely want to use that. Probably not going to use a second gingerbread house, and then of course I have to use the little gingerbread guy. And then I also like this. I don't know if this is supposed to be a donut or what, but I really like this guy. And we can probably squeeze this other small one. Let's get rid of the cookies for now. And what I want to do, I already have this vision in my head, is I want to do a collage of stamps, something like this. And then I'm going to have, let me see if I can find it. Okay, good news, I found it. It's hanging on by a thread, no pun intended, but I want to add this red and white ribbon and kind of wrap it around a few times on this left-hand side, you know, brown paper packages tied up with string. And then I want to take this stamp set here and use this Merry Christmas stamp here to create kind of a faux wax seal, if you will, to place on top of the thread. Okay, I know that's kind of a lot of talking through my process and getting a little ahead of myself, but that is the vision. But let's go ahead and ink up these stamps for right now. Okay, ta-da, our stamps now look a bit more distressed and they already look more natural on top of our package background here. Now, before we move on, I want to go ahead and create that faux wax seal that I was talking about, and I'm going to create that by using a stamp and some embossing powder. Now, I do think it would be incredibly cool to create your own wax seal, you know, like actually out of wax. Unfortunately, I don't have any wax on hand, so I'm going to be sticking with cardstock for today. And for the seal, I am using cardstock in the color Shamrock from Hero Arts, and before we emboss it, I'm just going to hit it with a tad bit of anti-static powder. That's probably more than I need, but you know what? Better safe than sorry. And then let's go ahead and grab our wax seal. I'm not sure, to be honest, if this stamp is intended to be a wax seal. It might be intended to be multi-purpose, but when I look at it, I see a wax seal. So that's what we're gonna do. Now let's go ahead and hit this guy with a little bit of Versamark watermark ink. And whenever I am doing heat embossing, you may not have to do this, but I always like to do at least 2 layers of watermark or Versamark or embossing ink, whatever you want to call it. There's so many names. Just because, you know, you can't really re-stamp if the embossing powder doesn't stick. So you might as well, you know, use it liberally up front. Let's bring in my embossing tray. And then for the embossing powder today, I'm using white detail embossing powder from Hero Arts. This is my go-to white embossing powder. Sometimes when I'm filming these YouTube videos, I forget that I'm not filming a TikTok. And if you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, you know that I do a lot of ASMR content. And so I'll be in the middle of filming this YouTube video, like I was just doing this embossing powder. And the people on TikTok, for whatever reason, love when I tap the paper. They call it the tippy tappies. And so as soon as I started doing that, I stopped talking because I was like, oh wait, I need to make sure they can hear the tippy tappies. And yes, I know I sound crazy. All right, let's hit this guy with just a little bit of heat. Okay, our seal is heat set, and then I'm just gonna wipe off the excess anti-static powder. Whoops, I just sprayed my paper. People ask me all the time what I use to wipe off the anti-static powder. I just use water, y'all. If you're using good quality cardstock, running a barely damp paper towel across the top of your cardstock is not going to hurt it. Now, to cut out our seal, I am going to use one of the dies that was included in the Postage Collage Die set. There's this little round die, which I don't know if this was intended to be a wax seal, but again, it's giving a wax seal energy to me, and it fits this little stamp just perfectly, so that's what we're running with. Okay, and grand reveal. Let's see. Voila! Doesn't that look like a wax seal to you? Kind of like a bottle cap too. You can maybe use this die for little bottle caps as well. Do you see the little tiny stitching in here? So much attention to detail on these dies, I love it. Okay, let's get this card assembled, shall we? Now, before I put the stamps on, do I want to do the thread first? I think I do. Let's go ahead and start with the thread, and I want to wrap it around this panel a few times. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a liberal amount of thread here. Let's see. Should that be enough to wrap it 3 times? I don't know. Like I said earlier, better safe than sorry. Let's go with that much. I measure some things, I don't measure others, y'all. Sometimes it's nice to live on the edge. And what I'm gonna do is I am just adding a little bit of tape runner back here as a bit of grounding support for this thread. And then I'm just going to kind of dip one end in there. And I'm gonna wrap this around 3 times. So I'm gonna start on this leftmost corner and cross down, come back around, and come back down diagonally on the other side. And then let's do one going straight down. And then I'm just gonna dip that back into the tape runner I already put on there. And then to be extra safe, y'all, I'm a sloppy crafter sometimes, don't judge. I'm just gonna run some tape runner over all of that. And then snip the thread. And the thing is, y'all, we're going to then tape this down to the card base. So this isn't like the only adherence that this thread is getting. Did I just use the word adherence correctly? I don't know if anyone's ever used the term adherence for taping things down, but anyway, that looks pretty good to me. I don't know about y'all. Okay, now next we want to put the wax seal on, and to do that, I'm actually going to put a tiny little bit of foam tape on either side of the wax seal so it can kind of sit on top of the thread, if that makes sense. So let me go ahead and grab just a tiny bit of foam tape. And I don't know, I'm gonna cut this into like triangles. I don't know why that makes sense to me, but it does. And then actually, I'm gonna put it on here instead of on the wax seal. Maybe it's better to do it on the seal. I don't know, y'all. I'm making this up as I go, so who knows? And then let's see if that fits. Yes, it fits perfectly. Now for placing our stamps. So let's see. I want to do this big guy up in the corner, and then we'll have this other tall guy coming across here. And I think I want to adhere those just straight to the card base, so probably just with some tape runner. And then I want to pop these guys up on just a little bit of foam tape to add some extra dimension here. All right, and foam tape. Don't you love when a card starts to come together? I feel like at this point you can finally start to see the vision come to life, you know? And I feel like when that happens, it's kind of like, I don't know if anyone else was a nerd in high school, but when you're doing a math problem and you really get in the zone and know that you're solving it the right way, you know what I'm saying? And it's just this like rush of adrenaline. I sound like such a nerd getting adrenaline from card making and math problems, but those of you out there that get me, you get me, you know what I'm saying. All right, let's lay this one. Sure, that looks good. And then last but not least, we have our little bird. And I think that for this one, I actually want to try and slide it behind this thread a little bit, just to keep everything three-dimensional and layered, right? Okay, perfect. I think that works. And then before we mount this, I think that it's only missing one other thing, and that is I want to add one of these stamps on top of the top right corner here, as if the package is being canceled out by the postal service. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and use this kind of wavy delivery stamp. I think that's probably the best option here. And I would hand stamp this, but I'm really nervous about messing this card up at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and use my Misty to put this guy on. Now, should I have done this prior to adding all this foam tape on? You know, probably, but it is what it is at this point. Okay, let's put this guy in the top right corner. I don't know if this is really true to life, but whatever. It's just a card. I think it's going to be cute regardless. Let's ink this guy up. Ta-da! Okay, you can see that it didn't fully get applied there on the edge behind the top stamp. But I think that's pretty good. Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's roll with it. I don't know, maybe that ruined it. What do you think? I'm not sold on the placement, but you know what? Like I said, it's just a card. We're gonna roll with it. We'll roll with the punches. And then the very last thing I want to do is mount this onto a pattern piece of cardstock, and then we'll finally be able to add it to our card base. So for the background, I have the Season's Greetings pattern paper pad, also from Waffle Flower. And what I think is really cool is they have these little striped papers in here. I don't know if this is intentional. I have to assume it is, but it reminds me of the Postal Service. So you could mount it on these colored stripes, which is really pretty. But I think just to tie it in with these red and white striped thread, they also have this red and white striped background. And yeah, that to me screams Christmas. So let's use that. And since I can't bear to waste so much of this patterned paper behind this card panel, I'm actually gonna go back to my nested dies here and cut out the inside part so that I can use it for a future project. Okay, and there we go. You can see that I cut out a perfectly centered and aligned rectangle. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. And then I'm gonna add just a bit of tape runner around the edges here, and then we'll be able to add our little package right centered in the middle. Hopefully. Okay, that looks pretty centered to me. And then, last but not least, we can finally add it to our card base. So I'm bringing in the card base that we made earlier. Remember, this is an A2 size card, 5.5 by 4.25 inches. And I am going to add tape runner again, all around the edges. But then I'm gonna use some liquid glue just in the middle area, because remember, I have all of this thread out here, and I find that liquid glue is a little bit stronger. So I'm gonna add some liquid glue in this middle area, especially over this thread, just to make sure that it stays in place. I get asked all the time what type of liquid glue I use. I tend to use Barely Art liquid glue, and I just transfer the glue into these little tiny bottles, which you can get these at pretty much any craft store, Michael's, Joann, Amazon, Simon Says Stamp, Scrapbook.com, they're everywhere. You can see I'm putting a good douse of liquid glue on these threads because I don't want them to go anywhere. And then of course, you can always use the Scor-Pal trick to help you line up your card front. Takes all the guesswork out. And voila, we are done. We have a completed postage themed Christmas card. I think this is frankly adorable, and I think that it's a really fun way to use this postage themed collection. Now remember, we did have a couple of leftover stamps. You can use these to make more of these cards with different stamped images. Although another fun idea is to actually use them to adorn the inside of the card. So you can see this is another example for the video I did for TikTok, where I did the front, very similar to what we just made. And then I actually went ahead and added these to the inside of the card, and then just snipped off the corners and then glued them here as well. So a really fun way to take the design elements from the front of the card, bring them inside for a complete, well-rounded design. Now for the big question. What do I think of the Postage Collage collection of products from Waffle Flower in general? Frankly, I think they're wonderful. I think that it's amazing that they've come up with a concept that allows people to create full cards very easily and with minimal guesswork. I mean, they have the die, which can take up a full A2 size card front if you want it to, while also giving you the flexibility to snip it apart and use it in a myriad of creative ways. Now, my only qualm about the whole collection is it can be pricey if you want the die and the stencils and the stamps, and they even have different size postage dies and different styles of postage dies now. And so I can see it becoming a very slippery slope, and it could get very expensive very quickly if you want to buy all of the things and then in a couple years maybe you're tired of making stamp themed cards. But again, I love that they do give you so many options, and as long as you're smart with your purchases and only buy things that you know you love and will use, I think that this is a home run. And clearly I'm not the only one who thinks that, because I have seen these postage themed products all over my Instagram, YouTube, Facebook all year long. So I think that in itself is a testament to how great and beloved this concept is. Not to mention, I've seen so many crafting brands since Waffle Flower came out with this collection kind of mimic and come out with their own versions of the same thing. And so clearly they were onto something great with this, and Waffle Flower deserves their flowers. No pun intended. Okay, and with that said, that is the video. Thanks everyone for tuning in and being here. I appreciate you joining me. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I have tons of other card making videos available to you now, and we'll have more coming out in the future. Be sure as well that you are following me over on Instagram at Ralph Tyndall Designs and TikTok at Ralph Tyndall. I will also leave all the supplies used in today's video in the description box below. But most of all, thank you for being here. Have a great day, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.